What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic.
I'm Jammin John.
And we have yet another album review for you. So one that was coming out on this week of the 21st of October that we had our eye on, and a little bit more underground than, well, maybe some of the other releases coming out this week, was the debut full-length from Vacuous, Dreams of Dysphoria. Again, this comes out on the 21st of October. This comes out in multiple formats on different labels. So if you want the vinyl version of this will be on Misako Un Ojo Records. If you want the CD version, it is on Dark Descent. And if you want the cassette for some ungodly reason, it is on FHED Records. This band formed in 2020 in London, England. This is, again, their first full length. They have one EP that came out last year. And this is some fresh, disgusting filth from the UK in terms of their death metal scene. And this is a pretty interesting album. It kind of wasn't what I expected, but it was one of those, like, I liked what I got, even though it, kind of surprised me in a way. This is, I would say, like, straight up, like, death metal, definitely, like, at its core. But this is way more atmospheric, and, man, like, this has, like, black metal coldness all over it, and dreariness, and almost like death doom, but it's really not any of those things. It's still death metal.
It's kind of like a culmination of all those things. I think Nick described it best. We were talking before we turned on the camera. The album as a whole kind of feels like the weather outside right now. Here in Northwest Ohio, it's about 37 degrees and dark and just shitty outside, which is what we're used to here in the Midwest. But that's kind of how this album feels.
It's more moody than I expected. Like, right away when this opens up with the song Devotion, instead of opening up with, like, well, at least not an intro, because everyone knows I don't like that, but it doesn't even open up with, like, a big riff. There's a mood-building, clean melody that actually carries the song for kind of much longer than I thought it would.
Yeah.
Even the harsher vocals, which are cavernous as fuck on here, kind of come in, and it's over more clean melodies. Like, there is, like, kind of a heavier melody behind it, but the clean melody really dominates it. And, like, as this keeps going, like, I don't know, this becomes a more, like, moody, somber sort of feel. Like, there are death doom breakdowns on there, but there's also blast beats and heavy machine gun riffing. But the all-encompassing mood of this album is just one thing that was kind of hard to ignore. Like, even towards the end of this song, it kind of shifts almost to, like, a dark, dreary post-metal feel, like, I would say Cult of Luna. Actually, stuff off of the last Cult of Luna, to be more specific, because, Jesus, that album's fucking depressing.
It took me by surprise, too. I wasn't sure what I was getting into. I, in fact, have never heard this band before. I've just heard of them, and I knew it was coming up in the releases, so I was like, cool. Got on Spotify, saw all the bands that for fans of, and I was like, well, shit, this is about to be a ride. I mean, it immediately sets the pace. The first song, Devotion, like Nick said, it immediately sets the pace with cold, bleak atmosphere. Haunting melodies go throughout this album. It just has a really, really, really depressive vibe. Like Paradise Lost kind of depression. Just like, man, fuck.
That's some good bummer music right there.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's still aggressive, too. When you get down to songs like Body of Punishment, Matriarchal Blood, and even Stigmata Scourge, like, there's still, like, some heaps of aggression. The opening to Matriarchal Blood is actually almost sort of a hardcore lead-in. Like, it has those big floor tom hits.
Tribal drums.
And, like, you can see the singer doing this, except, well, the singer's clearly bummed out because the whole music's still very bummerish, but it's still aggressive. It's aggressively depressing, I guess.
I
don't know. Like, I fucking hate life, and it's awful. Come cry with me.
Matriarchal Blood has not only good builds, but it has a lot of, like, blackened death metal, which they bring into play a lot in here. It goes from tribal drums to kind of this blasty, dark tremolo black metal section. But then it goes from black metal to doom. Hooded menace disma doom.
Yeah.
You're all doomed.
And, I mean, with that moody, fucking cold vibe, yeah, you kind of fucking feel doomed. Like, it isn't just like, man, that's fucking heavy and slow and just, doomy. It's like, man, I don't feel good about anything right now listening to this music. And a lot of it has to do with, like, the lead melodies on here. There aren't really, like, traditional solos on here. A lot of it is sort of like a lead melody on top of a absolutely dismal, soul-crushing riff.
Yeah.
Just to make sure that the whole soul-crushing part sinks in, they throw on these dissonant, very just sad tremolos and more atmospheric leads. And there is, I guess you could say, like a blackened vibe to it, but it also still has this like sort of caveman death metal sort of aesthetic too. So this is a very cold cave, like during the winter time. And the fucking cavemen are wearing corpse paint, maybe just a little bit. It's just dirt because they're fucking cavemen. I don't know. But the whole vibe of it is, I don't know, like it feels very cold and very just dreary. And even when it gets heavy, like even when it gets like really riffy and heavy, because like Body of Punishment is an absolute ripper of a song, very high paced, lots of blast beats, but it's the riffs on top of it. While they are like very heavy and very chuggy, like there's some fierce Morbid Angel tremolos on it, it never really loses that depressive vibe. And with the vocals being either like low cavernous growls or high desperate shrieks, like you either get the caveman or the guy that's literally trapped at the bottom of the well and dying. So I don't know, like you kind of get this weird contrast, but like when it weaves together, it's really fucking interesting.
The structure of these songs overall is really entertaining. A lot of twists and turns. Even when you think you know where it's going, it doesn't necessarily go there. Like it starts ambient and bleak, and then it gets blasty, and then it gets doomy, but sometimes it'll take that formula and completely switch it around. So you don't know where really anything is going. You'd think that would make for a more chaotic vibe, but I think it makes it more entertaining.
Honestly, the songs, I think, for the most part, flow really well. It's sort of a continuous barrage of depressing but heavy music. In fact, I'd say the first 3 tracks on here are all very different. Like they represent very different dynamics in death metal, where Devotion is very slow and bleak and doomy, and there's more clean melodies on it. Kind of remind me of yet another Dream Unending. Like it kind of has that clean, shiny sort of feel to it. And I don't know, like it's, again, creepy and haunting, but also very depressive. But then you get down to Body of Punishment. It is blasty. It is aggressive. Again, still somber, but I don't know, like there's an energy to it. Like it's a little bit more up-tempo, but still like completely bummed out.
Yes.
And then Matriarchal Blood has got this kind of hardcore vibe to it, like these old school death metal grooves. But, there's some death doom moments in there that are absolutely fucking punishing.
Now, there's a ton of atmosphere on here, which I know what you're saying, crazy, right? With music as depressive and as dark as this. But they don't rely on typical things that bands rely on to create atmosphere. There's not a lot of synth work except in the interlude where it just sounds kind of like dripping fucking sludge. But it's more in the background. The guitars have a fair amount of reverb on them and really dissonant, which, that's right here. Overall, it just sounds like murky and filthy, and there's no really uplifting moments at all.
No, I don't think any melodies on here had that ascending vibe at all.
No, they're all descending. In fact, Paranoia writes, while it has intense groove in it, there is a lot of intense groove, all the riffs are descending. There's nothing redeemable there as far as looking towards the light. It just keeps getting progressively darker.
The creepy whispers on that song too. Yeah, no, that was definitely like unsettling in the background. And I mean, a lot of this, like there were a lot of bands to compare this to. Like I thought of like Cruciamentum, namely because they're from the UK and they do this brand of death metal really well too, but also Tomb Mold. But a lot of this in terms of the whole mood and the vibe and even sort of the riff construction reminded me a lot of Hooded Menace, albeit sped up like 3 or 4 times.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
This is definitely like more mid-tempo to fast with like Death Doom breaks in it. But the vibe of it just kind of has that same feel of a Hooded Menace, thing, except they're crawling out of the grave much faster than Hooded Menace did.
There is some intense drumming. I'll give him that. When this guy does get blasty, he really accents nicely, not only with his snare, but with the bell of the ride a lot.
And the production here is really good. I think the guitars are a little bit murky, and I think they kind of blend in with the bass a little bit. The bass is very fuzzy. Like, you can just hear it sort of sizzle in the background. But when it comes down to, like, the more lead melodies on here, I think they come out really brilliantly in the mix. The vocals sit nice in the back. The drums sound fantastic. Like, I love the sound of the drums on here.
Drums actually sound very natural, very analog, raw sounding. There's not even really a lot of reverb on them, to be honest. They just sound present and there, and almost like you're sitting in the recording booth with the guy.
I think they saved all the reverb for the vocals because, man, they got like a pretty fair amount of it on there. But again, that works with the whole cavernous effect on here. As far as any like negatives on here, I think this album opens up stronger than it closes. Like the first 4 tracks on here, all really different from one another, and I think they all explore different dynamics, but it still keeps their uniform sound. Like, it doesn't sound like a bunch of different bands on here that had the same production knobs turned.
Right.
It sounds like them. They're just employing like some different dynamics again, like hardcore breakdowns, death doom, some blackened atmosphere, but it's all varied up really well. Towards the end of the album, I think it's still good, but I think a lot of that sort of like dynamic surprise is kind of out of their system, so they're kind of just riffing along. And again, I don't dislike anything on there. I just think some of the dynamics kind of like drop off a little bit.
Yeah, I think in the back half, while the songs are all good, like dude, the beginning of Dreams of Dysphoria has one of my favorite starts out of any song on this record. Again, who doesn't love gross, giant, epic doom? But I feel like the last 3 songs on the album, I guess the last 2 songs, excluding the interlude, while still musical, it's kind of like they wrote themselves into a corner. And I still don't want to say that the songs are bad, because they're not.
No,
they're not at all. It just seems like when they put the puzzle together on the last couple songs, they didn't necessarily know where it was going, so they just played some riffs, and it didn't seem to gel as well as the first few songs did. Again, I'm not saying it's bad, and that's not really a complaint, but it just seemed like it didn't necessarily fit where they wanted it to fit. I don't think they maybe got to finish that complete thought. Maybe. I don't know. I like how the title track opens up. Like, it's absolutely incredible. It reminds me a lot of Mortiferum. There's this really cool isolated tremolo harmony. You know, the drums come in, and oddly it has this fast hi-hat, which you're kind of expecting like a slower, you know, like a crash or something like that to sort of accent it. But I don't know, I kind of like how it builds with that. Like, that hi-hat is like, now listen, there's faster stuff coming, and it does come. And, you know, it's just the build-up to the payoff in that one. Like, I think the build-up, it goes someplace where I didn't think it was going to go, and honestly, it didn't necessarily fit as well, but I thought it closed really well with the same sort of like dreary, clean melodies that it opened with. Yeah, they bookended that nicely. Yeah, so again, it's not really a complaint. I think the song didn't go how I thought it would go, and that surprised me to the point where I started to not be able to make sense of what was happening, because I thought it was going to do something different. And so maybe that's on me. Maybe that's not even really a dig on the band. Maybe it's a dig on me. Maybe I'm just fucking, I don't know.
You're definitely, I don't know.
Maybe I'm a fucking dickhead. I don't know.
I'm not going to argue with you. You win that argument right now.
Well, at least I won something. Loser.
At least not dickhead. But back to the point where you said, like, there was something you were missing. I don't know. Like, honestly, I think maybe, like, there was room to maybe expand some of these songs. Like, namely that last track. The title track, I think there was room to expand it, because this album is only a little bit over 32 minutes long. So it kind of feels like maybe some of these songs could have been broadened. I think that mostly is applicable to the last track, the title track, as a like giant, like doomy closer. But I mean, overall, like, I think this is a really concise listen. I just think maybe there's like some stuff that, you know, they could explore a little bit more and maybe sort of iron out and make even more grandly depressing. But overall, I dug this. I thought this was pretty good, and this is my first experience with the band, and pretty solid impression. So I'm going to go ahead and give it 3.5 stars. I like a lot of what they're doing. This whole like interesting mood thing on here, because it isn't necessarily death doom. It's not necessarily black and death metal, but it has that cold and sort of depressing vibe of both, but it still kind of maintains a fierce anchor in just straight up death metal. I like the atmospheric lead work on here. The vocals are particularly haunting and creepy. The riff work's really solid. Production's good. I just think towards the end of the album, it didn't have as big of an impact as the beginning of the album. The beginning of this album, I think, is absolutely fantastic. Like, I was hooked on every song, and I was really surprised at the like cool transitions into stuff that I wasn't expecting. This is a solid band, though. I'm definitely going to order this one. I'm probably going to get their fucking EP too, just for good measure. I recommend this if you're a big fan of, again, like Incantation, Drawn Quartered, Tomb Mold, Disma,
Phobophilic.
Yeah, like if you like your death metal fucking atmospheric and maybe just a wee bit depressing as fuck, definitely check this out. It's a solid listen.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a 3.5 too. I'm leaning more towards a 4. I had a really good time with this. I didn't know what again, I don't think either of us really knew what we were getting into. This album is fun in a sad sort of way.
It's like a kid crying in a fucking ball pit. Just like, I should be rolling around and having fun, but these balls smell like pee.
Somebody peed over here, I'm sure of it. It doesn't rely solely on one genre to keep your attention flowing. You get like little snippets of the best kinds of death metal. You get doomy breakdowns, you get riffy as fuck blasty moments, you get cold, dark, bleak atmosphere, you get murky filth, but it's not one of those things separately. It's kind of like just a piece of that. It's kind of like a metal casserole, so to speak. You just get everything. Or like a 7-layer lasagna. You just get this whole fucking meal with this band.
And the heartburn.
But the back half of the record is like serving a 4-course meal in reverse order. You start off really strong instead of the way it should be, where you start off with a salad and an appetizer, and then you get to the filet mignon and the dessert. I think actually if they would have taken this record and flipped it around, I think it actually would have flowed a little better. Now, that's just me. I really thought it was good. I really thought it was an entertaining listen. The riffs on here are a lot of fun. And I wouldn't even state that the heftiness comes from things like chug and like constant, balls to the wall riffing. I think that the emotion of this record comes from just how dark and depressing it is and how they can fit each of those elements in to make that sound a whole. Really actually excited to see where this band goes in the future. I think these guys are going to be a great addition to the death metal scene, no doubt.
My guess would be Therapy is the next place they're going if they're all...
I mean, if they don't go to Therapy, I'm going to go back to Therapy because I'm not feeling right.
I'm going to listen to it again. I don't give a fuck about my emotions.
I'm probably going to jam it on the way home in the dark because the drive home is dark and cold.
So, if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up, and if you're new to the channel, subscribe because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there is a link down below to thrallsmetal.com. Therein is a link to our Patreon and our shop there, too. If you'd like to get one of our t-shirts, we will eventually have some different merch in there. I've been told kind of yes on the grenades, and I'm going to keep pressing that issue until they just say yes or I ignore them more.
One of those two things will happen. Either we're going to say yes or we'll ignore him more. So, eventually we're not going to talk to each other, I think.
But that's a yes.
But that'll be the grenade that drops.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And then the actual grenades. And, of course, thank you all so much for liking, subscribing, following, all that stuff. We appreciate the living shit out of it. Here comes the big thank you part of the video. I gotta do it because every time I do this, it still fucking blows me away that people watch it. You guys could have so much better taste, but we're glad you don't because that kind of keeps us going. The response we've got from the whole metal community is still staggering. Like, it still kind of blows me away, and honestly, it keeps us motivated to keep making shit because, well, there's a lot of fucking stuff we want to cover, and, well, if we have the time, we'll probably fucking cover it because we have literally nothing better to do. So, once again, thank you all so much for watching, and we will catch you later.